Hey guys, Dr. Bodle here, and something you might be wondering about is whether or not you should be snacking frequently or eating 5 to 6 small meals per day to help boost your metabolism and support your hypothyroid weight loss. But to answer that question, it's my favorite thing, which is that the context is important. So in today's video, we're going to look at why both snacking and not snacking can be helpful depending on the situation. And remember, if you like these kind of videos and enjoy learning about how natural strategies can support your Hashimoto's and hypothyroid symptoms, give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for new videos every Thursday. Now I know that I just said that snacking or not snacking could be supportive to our health depending on the situation. But in general, I believe that not snacking is more preferable. And here's why I think that. Our bodies, and a sign of good health, is resiliency, meaning that you can throw a lot of different things at it, and no matter what's going on, it's able to kind of absorb that pressure, absorb that stress, and still be able to function in a healthy way. When we start to lose that resiliency, I think it's a pretty strong indicator of decline. Think about someone who might be getting a bit older, and because they've had falls in their life, they now make sure that they're always on a level surface and they never challenge their body by being on a trail or being on the lawn where the grass isn't totally even. Their body isn't resilient enough to deal with those little perturbations and disturbances in each one of their steps. So they mitigate any risk by being in an environment that is very neutral and very tolerable. The same thing goes for those of us who are dealing with thyroid issues. Our body doesn't do well when it's challenged. So that might mean if we're in a cold environment, it can be very stressful to us. Or maybe even if we're in a hot environment. If the amount of sleep that we get is just a little bit less than normal, then maybe our function the next day is severely impacted. And when we do something like work extra hours or try to exercise at the gym, afterwards we can notice a flare-up of symptoms and an overall worsening of how we feel. But how does all of this tie into snacking? Well, one of the main goals of our body and a part of our physiology that our thyroid hormone has a direct impact on is to produce energy. If we can produce enough energy, then we can use it for, whatever we need to use it for. That might be for our brain to function appropriately, or it might be for the cells in our skin to heal a cut that we have on our arm. Lack of metabolism due to changes in thyroid hormone, and therefore a lack of energy, leads to a decline in function. Just like I've said before, if we don't put gas into our car and we don't burn that gas, then our car isn't going to go anywhere. So even though our thyroid is a huge part of burning that gas or burning that fuel, we need to have fuel to burn in the first place. Now we can get this fuel from one of two places. Either we can get it from the food that we're eating, or we can get it from the calories that we already have stored in our body. As someone becomes more unhealthy or less resilient, our body's ability to pull those calories from storage becomes less efficient or diminished. This in turn requires us to more heavily rely on nutrients or calories that we're receiving from our diet. So although you could support your energy levels by more heavily relying on your food intake, and believe me, a lot of people do just that, it's not very resilient of you. Now you might be asking, why does this actually matter? Does resiliency actually confer better benefits to me? And the answer is yes, and there's a couple of implications here, not only for your energy production, but also for how we manage our weight efficiently. So as I said, if we need the raw materials for our cells, that way they can burn it for energy, we are either getting it from our nutrition, from our diet, or from stored calories. And in both situations, we're breaking down more complex molecules, and then we're creating fatty acids or glucose that then can be transported throughout the bloodstream and delivered to the cells that need it. Throughout this process, our brain is monitoring the situation, and it's helping to direct the flow of nutrients and fuel based on demand and based on where the fuel is coming from. And to some degree, from the perspective of a single cell, it doesn't care where the glucose is from. Glucose that's being created from our liver or glucose that is coming from our diet is the same, and it can be burned in the same way. But your brain is not a single cell, and it is more concerned with your long-term health and with your survival. So if your body does receive nutrients and calories in the form of food, then your brain needs to decide where that should be allocated. A portion of those calories is going to go to your cells for energy production. But once that demand is met, then your body doesn't want to be inefficient. And historically speaking, calories are tough to come by, and we don't want to waste any that we've been presented with. So whatever is left over, your brain is going to coordinate or dictate that to specific parts of our body through a cascade of hormones telling us to store those away. So when we're eating, as long as our energy demands are met, our body is in storage mode. We're trying to put some of those calories into our savings account. That way we can withdraw that at a later date or whenever we need it. But if we're constantly eating all the time, what sort of signal is that sending to our brain and to our body on a hormonal level? It's telling us to be in storage mode. And although, yes, some of this is being used by our cells for energy, most of it is directing a flow down a one-way street that never gets reversed, because why would we ever want to take energy out of savings if we know we're getting new installments all the time? This eventually leads to a point where we're doing so much storage that our storage containers become overfull. And I know I just used the example of a savings account. It'd be nice if our savings account could become overfull, but okay, we're shifting analogies here a little bit. But this is when, on a lab basis, we start to see the beginnings of metabolic syndrome and changes in BMI and body mass. If we have so many excess calories in the system, we start to see increased levels of triglycerides and increased levels in blood glucose and hemoglobin A1C. But not only do these markers represent abnormal physiology and excess energy and excess storage within the system, it also represents what you already know to be true. And that is that your weight is likely increasing, and when you try to make changes, it's very difficult for you to manage it. Now that was a lot, but hopefully it helps to illustrate a little bit more about how our physiology works, and I didn't get too far off into the weeds. But to summarize, our metabolism should be bidirectional. It should be able to change depending on the circumstances. Sometimes getting calories from our food, sometimes getting calories from our storage. But if we're eating too frequently throughout the day, then it's going to drive our metabolism to more consistently get calories from our food, and that never allows us to tap into those calories that were previously stored. Over time, this leads to the slow accumulation of body fat, and when we try to lose that weight, but we're continuing to eat frequently because that's the only way our body knows how to generate energy, then it can be extremely difficult to get any results. But if that's the case, if we want to have a resilient, dynamic system that can pull energy and calories from multiple places, then why did I say in the beginning of the video that snacking or frequent eating can be helpful for some people? Now, don't get me wrong, it's not because eating more or eating more frequently revs up your metabolism or revs up your engine. Your total energy expenditure, or the amount of calories that you burn in a day, is instead based on maintenance of your current organs and tissues in combination with your non-exercise movement and your exercise activity. The only situation where that might be true is if you're eating such a low amount of calories that your body is in more of a starvation mode. In those cases, your brain will dial back the amount of calories that you're burning in a day to more closely approximate the calories that it's receiving. Once we start eating more, that caloric burn will increase as a reflection of more healthy metabolic function. One way to do that, of course, would be to eat more, and we can do that by eating more frequently. However, in absence of starvation mode, which most of us want to avoid because there are negative health consequences that come with it, eating frequently can be helpful, not because it revs up our metabolism, but by helping to provide fuel stability to the system. Now, what I mean by this is what we see physiologically when the body is subjected to undue amounts of stress or inflammation, which are very commonly associated with changes in our thyroid function. Like we said before, Our brain is always monitoring the flow of fuel and calories, and it wants to make sure that our cells have enough available substrate, that way they can meet their energy demands. But when more stress and inflammation are present, our brain's ability to recognize changes in fuel levels becomes impaired. This leads to fuel levels dropping to a point beyond what is healthy for our body, and this can therefore limit our cells' ability to produce the energy that they need. When this happens, our system essentially crashes, and this crash is inflammatory in and of itself. This inflammation can then contribute to symptoms and also perpetuate this cycle of our brain not being able to recognize changes in fuel levels that we were having issues with in the first place. I'll describe this to patients, and I've used this example on the channel before, but think of it like your cell phone. If your cell phone goes from 100% to 50%, that's no big deal. But if it goes from 50% to 0%, then your cell phone shuts down and you have to restart. You can think of your body in a similar way. As long as there's some charge remaining or some buffer zone, you generally can do okay. But if you keep taking things down to 0% and totally empty the tank, then you get caught in this self-perpetuating loop and the recovery is way harder. So what should we do? If our brain can't manage fuel levels on its own, these crashes are sending you into a tailspin and the associated inflammation is preventing you from getting better. Well, if we can't stabilize our fuel through internal mechanisms, then we have to do it through external support. Suddenly, this is where snacking and eating frequently can become very beneficial to us. By essentially giving our body a little bit of a caloric drip throughout the day, it allows us to avoid those crashes and provide more stability. By taking pressure off of our brain and allowing that system to recover, over time, it will start to self-regulate again, and we won't have to be so diligent with our meal timing. The key thing here is recognizing if you start to become symptomatic when you don't eat. If that's the case, then your fuel levels are unstable and they're being remedied by the fuel that you're providing it from your food. Therefore, you'll want to identify how long it takes for this to occur. Then put a plan in place for you to eat before those symptoms actually develop. Now keep in mind, because of what we talked about in the first half of the video, eating frequently like this might not allow you to lose weight efficiently, but it might be what you need to stabilize your symptoms. Although many people do want to lose weight and it's a totally reasonable goal, it's not always the first thing that we can focus on. By providing your system with the nutrients and calories that it needs to heal, we can then manage our inflammation, as we said before, provide stability to the system, and from there, once we're more resilient, we can choose to have less frequent meals at a time and place where our body can tolerate it, and therefore utilize those strategies to help us to manage the weight. But as I love to point out, there's a lot of good strategies out there, and different people are going to advocate for the things that work for them. We just have to figure out whether or not it's going to work for you. And depending on where you're at in your health journey, sometimes we have to change and adjust depending on what our goals are. Now, I understand that that can be a tough concept to grasp, and even myself, if someone were to tell me to do something and it's working, well, I want to keep on doing that thing. But we should also be open to the idea that we can make changes, and that's okay. And that's why we want to continually be assessing our health and also what's working for us and what isn't. But hopefully this video gave you a new perspective on that idea through the lens of snacking and meal frequency. But if you have any questions or want to share any thoughts, make sure to leave them for me in the comments down below. If you like the video but need more help and are looking for someone to assess your health, identify any holes or gaps in your physiology, and provide you with a clear plan to start feeling better, then you can always send me an email at contact@seattlethyroidhelp.com. And once we hear from you, my staff will reach out and see if you qualify for a free consultation where you and I can sit down one-on-one and determine if we're a good fit to work together. If you'd rather keep learning on your own, make sure to grab either one of my free downloads listed in the description box below, or check out any of the other videos on my channel, and don't forget to follow me on social media. But that is all for now. Thanks you guys, love you guys, hope you're doing well. If you have any questions or if you need anything, feel free to reach out. But my name is Dr. Bodle. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.